Hi, my name's Louise Larson. I run August Consulting and I help families on the road to college. And this is my webinar for October 2025. I will start with the usual news and notes. Um, Lots of little things going on in college admissions right now. I'm filming this on October 1st, and just this very week, Charlie Javis was sentenced to 85 months in prison for a fraudulent client list for a startup she founded named Frank. And Frank's objective was to help families with financial aid forms. And JP Morgan Chase bought them to have access to these families and hopefully solicit them for banking services. And she fraudulently, when she sold the company to them, she had a fraudulent client list. So that's what it was based on. She was sentenced to 85 months in prison. So more jail sentences around people doing things in the college planning world. Um, there was a class action lawsuit. I mentioned this earlier when this initially came out about a year ago, um, where there's a class action lawsuit that defendants charged that students of divorced or separated parents were overcharged by forcing them to consider the financial information of the non-custodial parent on the CSS profile. So this hit, 40 selective institutions, and they called it price fixing. And when making both parents submit their financial information, and um, it was dismissed. I mean, I understand it. I don't, when you have to do the CSS profile, it's very, very detailed, but it really isn't price fixing to say that both parents have to come to the table at a private school who is going to be using their institutional funds. So that was dismissed. Um, I loved this quote I heard on a webinar of college admissions people um, about, you know, they said, we don't care what you do. We care about why you do it. So when kids are going to put together what they're going to tell colleges and essays, it doesn't matter what it is. We want to know why it's meaningful and important to you. Elon in Raleigh, North Carolina, is merging with Queens College. So usually, I think we're going to see more and more of this where a stronger college absorbs a smaller college that might not have a path forward. Um, the University of North Dakota is one of the only systems that has had growth. They have had 4% growth in their student population. And the other interesting fun fact about North Dakota is they have the largest fleet of training aircraft outside of the US military. So pilots, people that want to get pilot training, that's a school that they would want to look at. Auburn has announced that they are going to return to requiring testing in 2027. That's not a big surprise because they have said point blank on their website, we are test preferred. So, not a surprise. We continue to see budget cut issues. University of Wisconsin has had their budget cut and they have upped their application fee to $80 and they are going to require the CSS profile. Now we're seeing more and more public schools require the profile. I believe University of Vermont added it. Um, Wisconsin's adding it. So it used to be the domain much more of private schools, but there's a couple of publics that have been requiring it for a while, and now we have Wisconsin adding to that. I thought it was an interesting piece of information. I listened to a presentation about Duke, and Duke is facing a $350 million cut in their budget. So they are trying to contract their budget by $350 million. Now that's a lot. Um, One thing we saw was Duke activating their wait list over the summer, which is very interesting. I don't know if that was because they didn't think their international kids were going to come and or they were going to lose some of their international kids. The other thing about Duke opening their wait list, and I wondered about this, was if Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and Stanford, if those wait lists are moving, maybe they are accepting kids that said no thanks to Duke. So Duke might have had kids summer melt from other kids getting off wait lists. and their international kids not coming, and they're facing a $350 million um, budget cut. They have offered a 10% of their faculty a voluntary separation package, and they have said point blank, involuntary cuts will be coming. This is another factor for Duke would be the endowment tax. They're probably getting hit with the endowment tax. Their federal and state funding might be cut. And of course, the international students. So when you see a really, you think, how could Duke not have enough money? Well, $350 million is a lot of money, and that's what they're short. So when you see a really, really well-endowed school like that with a lot of resources facing big cuts, you know, probably everybody's in the same boat. Um, the federal government has asked for, they proposed a new Admissions Consumer Transparency Supplement, or ACTS, ACTS, not to be confused with the ACT test. They want data reported by race and sex around admissions test score quintiles, GPA quintiles, family income range, Pell Grant eligibility, parental education. The challenge here is um, it's not going to factor in legacy status and athletic recruits, and in selective schools that can be a significant part of the of who's getting in. Um, and the other thing about that is they're not going to have the financial information from students that did not fill out financial aid paperwork. So, it would be good to have that transparency, I think, and see exactly how this is shaking out and who's getting in. But if the kids didn't fill out the FAFSA or the profile, then you don't have a lot of the information around income. There's a new book coming out called The Hottest Seat on Campus by Angel Perez, who is the head of NACAC, the National, College Admissions Counseling professional group. Before that, he was the head of admissions at Trinity College. He's a very high profile person. It'll be a very interesting book to read. I have often said I think that these admissions jobs look incredibly difficult. I um, saw an interesting presentation from Northeastern. They're leaning so heavily into early decision. They've got campuses all over the place. They've got Boston, they've got Oakland, they've got London. They have a place in Miami. They opened a campus in New York City. Half the class is coming in early decision. They're giving their early decision kids a fee waiver to apply. They're giving them a scholarship to take classes online before they even come to Northeastern. And they're giving them a $5,000 global experience fund to go abroad as sophomores. Um, so they're really pushing early decision. Um, University of Connecticut is really stepping up on their out-of-state recruitment. They were one of the schools that put early decision in recently, and they have territory managers now around the country trying to bring people in. Um, trying to see, I thought there was one more thing that, no. Um, I loved one of my seniors that I'm working with. They had everything kind of wrapped up by Labor Day, and we were putting the final touches on things. And as they were heading back to school, I said, "Well, you must, I mean, you must feel really good. You must be, you must have friends that aren't this far along." And they said, "Oh, yes, I'm helping them all." So this person has become the de facto college counselor for their peer group, which I thought was great. I wanted to touch base on about, I mentioned this book. Um, this book is called A Problem of Fit, and this is by Phil Levine. And Phil is an economics professor at Wellesley College. And I heard him years ago, and he kind of got me right out of the gate because he said, I had children approaching the college age where they were in high school and we had to sort out this college thing. And I was trying to figure out how, what was it going to cost? I mean, he said, I make a good living, but I don't have endless amounts of money for education. And I wanted to start to figure this out. And he said, I have a PhD in economics and I couldn't figure this out. I was absolutely flummoxed by this thing. So he wrote this book called A Problem of Fit. And, look, he's an academic guy. It's a very dry academic book. I got myself through it. But I, you look, if you want to read it, absolutely. I don't not recommend it. It's just very, very academic. I loved on the beginning, he said, For each family, the price should be understandable and known, and it should be affordable. And that's what is missing. Because you can go to a school's website where it says, half of our class got, $57,000 a year in scholarship money from financial aid. But if that class came in as a very low income group and you're not a low income person, it doesn't mean you're going to get $57,000. Maybe their average is just low because their average is so high because they're bringing in lower income kids. By the same token, if the sticker price looks so high and you don't think you can afford it, their average might be their average scholarship might be low because they're bringing in very wealthy kids and you might get aid. So there's no way of knowing until you're really there and getting the offers. And rarely do you have to buy something that's so vague because just because what you paid freshman year isn't necessarily what you're going to be paying in the coming 3 years. Um, what I really loved, and he illustrated, he ended up going into the Wellesley admissions office and saying, let's work together. And he put together this thing called My Intuition, where you can actually go to his this website and get a sense of what a college is going to expect you to pay, probably closer than a net price calculator. But he talked about at the end of the book, he put together just for Wellesley, he said, how about if he put together like a spreadsheet, like an Excel thing on a laptop that families, if they came to Wellesley and really liked it and went on tour, they offered the ability to go onto this spreadsheet and just plug in some of their numbers and see what Wellesley would might offer them. So it was almost like a net price calculator customized to Wellesley, just sitting on a laptop in their admissions office. And he said, I would see parents come in and they brought their child to Wellesley, the kid really liked Wellesley, and they would come in with their shoulders and their ears, like so nervous and stressed because, the sticker price of Wellesley's quite high. And he said they would go into this little private room and put all their numbers in, and they would come out like, this might work. I think this is a thing. And he said the body language going in and the body language coming out, this is just really challenging for families. So, look, I'm a big Phil Levine fan. I don't know if it's Levine or Levine. I don't know how he says it. He still is at Wellesley. If you're really looking for, an understanding of college funding, college admissions, and college financial aid and merit scholarships and how it all works. I think the more accessible book is The Debt Trap by Josh Mitchell. The Debt Trap: How Student Loans Became a National Catastrophe. He's a Wall Street Journal um, journalist. He writes for them, and that's a very good book. And of course, The Price You Pay for College, an entirely new roadmap for the biggest financial decision your family will ever make by Ron Lieber, who is a personal finance columnist for the New York Times. Um, I don't know what book I read it in, but these are the most important things for people. Are their children and their money? And, how's it all going to go? Um, so I did finish that book. It took me a while because it was a little dry, but I did like it, and I'm a fan of that, Phil Levine. So the other book I read, this just came out. I was very excited for this book, Dream School by Jeff Selingo. It's kind of his part two of Who Gets In and Why. Who Gets In and Why came out a couple years ago, and I should have my copy over here, but I don't. Anyway, very good book. Um, I think what one of my takeaways was, and because I kind of went through it and I still am doing this work, one of the takeaways was really how COVID created such a scramble. How COVID, with the test optional, everything just, schools started to get inundated with applications. So then they were doing more things. I mean, how the whole thing got more chaotic and how you can pull out of that chaos and create some sanity for yourself. So, what I wanted to talk about was that's kind of all my news and notes. I don't think there's anything else really pressing right now. The first deadlines are coming up. October 15th is, North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and South Carolina, and maybe one in Georgia Tech for in-state. I don't know. But, application season is here. And so what I wanted to talk about was how to support your children through this. And my whole foundation in this came to me when I returned to teaching. I took 10 years off to have three kids, and I returned to teaching. And when I returned to full-time teaching at a new school, I was placed with a Spanish 5 class of seniors. And so I walk in and these kids, it's a very, it's 100% of these kids are going to college. It's a public magnet school and all these kids are going to college and a lot of them are going to really, really selective colleges. So I go in and I'm back to teaching and I have this class of seniors. There's about 12, 15 of them and it's Spanish 5. And I had this kid in there and he just carried himself differently. He was walking through the world in a different way than his peers. And you could feel the stress, you could feel the agita. These kids, they're all just really high achieving. And this this one kid was just like loose as a goose. And I I noted it right away, but I didn't really understand why. But as the more I got to know him and the more the year went on, I realized, wow. And this kid came to school every day, head to toe in Virginia Tech gear. He had two different pairs of Virginia Tech sneakers. I can see him with his Virginia Tech lanyard in his keys. T-shirts, sweatshirts, shorts, sweatpants, jackets. He was a Hokie, and it was notable because it was so complete every day. And this kid was a real star. I mean, he had major student leadership roles. He was a top student, top rigger, test scores. I mean, he was the total package. But this kid was walking through the world not stressed. He was happy. He was carefree. He was thriving, but not stressed. And so the year went on, and September, October, November, and middle of December, he comes in and goes, yeah, I'm going to Virginia Tech. I got in early decision. I applied to Virginia Tech early decision, and I'm just thrilled. And what came about from that, and what I realized sort of quickly, because he said, and maybe it was even a conversation in class with his peers. Somebody said, "You could have gone somewhere better." And he said, "I don't want to go anywhere better. I want to go to Virginia Tech." And apparently his older siblings went to Virginia Tech. He'd been going, he loved Virginia Tech. That was his dream. And make no mistake, this kid was a top, applicant, but his dream was Virginia Tech. And I had to get in touch with him for something else later on after he had gone to Virginia Tech. And he went into Virginia Tech. He was a first year sophomore. He had so much credit that he was actually a sophomore and he had scholarship money and I mean he had such a platter of options and at the time I think my oldest child was maybe like in eighth grade and I just as the year went on and how loose and free and happy this kid was I took, I mentally was like, this is what I want for my kids, my biological children. I don't want to be this strung out and stressed about this stuff. To, I want them to be moving through the world quite differently than this kid. This kid was just moving in a different way than his peers. So that was what I aim to do with my biological children. And it is also what I try to do for every family that I work with, is to alleviate stress. So if you're a parent of a high school student, can you um how can you approach this? How can you try and create an environment where your child feels good and isn't thinking the only way forward is selective college admissions, or it's not, or it's a fail. And so I thought I would put together a few things that you can do. Um, and I'm not going to call it do's and don'ts because it's vaguer than that. And so here is how some of the things you can do. You're going to have to be very patient. If you were to approach the college admissions process as your adult self, you would crush it. You would be so organized. You would have a spreadsheet. You would be on top of it, and you would get it done in a way that you might not have as a high school student. And your adolescent is going to probably weave and wander a little bit. And, you're going to have to be patient and really let them figure it out because kids who really figure it out from, say, ninth grade through 12th grade, when they actually put a deposit down, when those kids have really meandered through this path, they arrive at a campus more likely to be successful than kids whose parents have done it for them and made it easier. And, you might be stressed, so it might be easier for you to do it. But don't let them do it and let them kind of sort it out because when they get there, they're going to kind of know why they picked it, why they're there, have more of a sense of what they're doing and why. Um, do not start at the most selective schools. There's a reason that some of these schools are so popular. They are gorgeous. They have an aura. Um, when you are looking at really, I think any sort of admit rate under, say, 25%, where it's 1 out of 4, you don't know. Even if your kid is super strong, you don't know. So, starting at schools where your child has a good chance of admission, where they can feel like, um, I got a shot here. One kid I worked with one time did a trip down south. They went to Duke and Chapel Hill and Wake Forest and Elon. And I said, "What did you like?" And they said, "Well, I actually really did like Elon." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because I think I could actually potentially go there. The rest of them all just feel like, big reaches." So getting them onto some campuses where they actually like it and they are a strong candidate, it's more of a likely admit for them. That will really alleviate stress because that becomes your worst case scenario is, hey, I really did like that school. And, I don't have to worry so much because if I can go to a couple schools like that, it would be great to get into more of a reach school. But if I don't, I know I'm going to be okay. The other way to think about this is to really think of yourself as the co-pilot. If you are the passenger in a car, you are doing things that are different from what the driver is doing. So letting your kid drive this process. If you say, okay, we've got a long weekend in October, what might you like to go see? Do they want to go north? Do they want to go south, east, west? What are they thinking? And following their lead. So in all things, if you think about it that way, you're in the passenger seat, they're driving. How can you assist the driver? Can you get them food? Can you get the map out? Can you, figure out where the next gas station is? And doing the same thing with college admissions. And in that same kind of area, ask them what they want. Is a lot of administrative work here. I mean, I booking campus tours is not simple. And so, signing up for the SATs, booking campus tours, helping them, you know, carve out time on a Sunday to maybe do some of their own SAT prep. Ask what they want. Some kids would really thrive with some administrative help. Some kids really need some administrative help. Some kids would say, I think I can do that work. I don't want help. Set a structured time to discuss this. And if you feel like, hey, you know what, I went on a website today to try to organize tours, I need to talk to them about this. Ask them if you did a bunch of work on Monday and you need to get their feedback and figure out a plan how to move forward, ask them on Monday, say, is there a time in the next day or two we could talk about this? Don't just kind of bombard them. Be clear right out of the gate where the financial piece fits in. If you know, I've had people say to me, I've got more than enough money to go to any college on a 529. I don't even want to talk about money. God bless you. That is wonderful. If you are, I work with families that have had like three kids in college at once. That's going to take some serious and, planning, unless you are very, very fortunate. So you might need merit aid. You might feel that $100,000, even if you can afford it, is not something you're comfortable with. Um, it's really important to talk about that and early and say, because again, if you read these college books that I just showed you, it's a little bit like buying a plane ticket. Different schools allow um, different formulas for how they're going to give out aid. I was helping a family this week, and they ran their numbers at a very expensive private school, and it was actually potentially more affordable than the public schools. And I said, wow, maybe need to find a few more of these private schools. Um, so the money piece is really important. Um, Remember that students who go through this process will have a lot of ups and downs and a lot of decisions to make, large and small. And this process is almost a template for adult life. Okay, I've got project management, decisions to be made. Doing it with this will allow them to choose between jobs down the road, how to analyze buying a house. Doing this is a really important step, and giving them time and space to do it, they learn how to adult. Um, the last thing I will say is that the road to college is a journey of self-discovery and allowing space for changes and pivots, giving them room to say, I think I want to apply to a 7-year BSMD program and then say, you know what, maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to do something a little different and not have medical school be quite so much of my undergraduate. Or um, I think I want to, they think they're going to go into engineering and then they decide maybe they don't want to do that. They want to move in a different direction. The other thing I would give kids space for, especially in ninth and 10th grade, kids talk a big game in ninth and 10th grade. I want to go to West Point. I want to go to California. And it's all very abstract. And might be like, West Point, that's not, how are you going to do that? Or absolutely no to California. I would almost give them a little space because most kids kind of do come around a little bit as it becomes more in focus and more of a reality. Like, you know, maybe I'll just do maybe like a ROTC program, or California would be, I don't know if I want to be on a plane all the time, or I want to be able to come home. A lot of kids, as they turn the corner into 11th grade, shift some of their priorities. So if in ninth grade they're talking about something that you're like, oh no, wait a minute, you don't have to like let them explore it a little bit. And if it gets closer in 11th grade, you can start to say, you know what, we're really not comfortable with you going that distance. And a lot of families shifted their distance parameters after COVID. So that's okay. But letting them have the time and space. And the last thing I will say is when you do your visits, especially senior year, and I can't believe I'm getting choked up about this, it can be really special one-on-one time that you might not get with them again in the rush of senior year with all their different social activities and athletics, and so that time with them is just really special. So I wasn't counting on getting so emotional, but nothing's more important than our children. So that's what I've got for October. If there's any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And I'll be back in November. And in November, I'm going to talk about portals, what they are, what you need to know, and why they are so important. Thanks for watching.